Snow whispered beneath her boots, each step muffled by the thick powder blanketing the Canadian Yukon. The air held a silence so deep it bordered on reverence, broken only by the slow crunch of Ava McAllister's careful tread. She paused near the crest of a hill, the barrel of her old L96A1 rifle resting against her shoulder like a familiar weight. From this vantage, she could see the valley below, a stretch of forest, frozen river, and smoke that curled skyward like a black question mark. She narrowed her eyes. The smoke didn't belong. Ava dropped to her belly, blending instantly into the terrain. Her ghillie suit was stitched with dried twigs, patches of white linen, and burlap dyed in shades of pine and stone. To a drone, she'd be nothing but another lump in the snow. Through the scope, she found the source, an entire structure burning, its timber frame collapsed inwards, flames licking through the remains like hungry tongues. It had once been a cabin, small and tucked into the woods like a secret. Ava knew the place. She'd helped the old couple who lived there stack firewood 2 winters ago. Now it was gone. Her finger hovered near the trigger, though there was no target in sight, only the smoldering aftermath and movement in the treeline beyond. 6 armored figures in shimmering blue-black exosuits swept through the snow like predators. Their helmets bore a sickly green glow, and their rifles crackled with static energy that fizzed against the silence. They moved with precision, weapons up, boots crunching without stealth or caution. Galactic Dominion troops. She'd heard the rumors. Orbiting ships spotted over major cities, bizarre power surges, and then the reports of isolated, test landings. Earth wasn't invaded, they called it a training exercise. A skirmish. A game. Ava's jaw clenched as she watched one soldier pause near a fallen tree, lift his helmet's visor, and spit into the snow. His mouth moved, and through a small receiver clamped to her ear, Ava caught the translated broadcast. Another weak sector. Primitive. Their females can't even hold a weapon, let alone fight. A burst of laughter followed. The voice was grating, metallic, almost amused. No challenge here. The others chimed in, voices soaked in arrogance and disinterest. They moved on, leaving the burning wreckage and the bodies within it like they were stepping over discarded trash. Ava slowly exhaled through her nose. Her hands didn't tremble, though her veins felt filled with ice. She'd seen brutality before, war zones in foreign lands, civilians caught in the crossfire of men with egos and agendas. But this was something different. It was cold not just in action, but in purpose. She rolled onto her back, staring up at the gray sky. Snowflakes drifted down, catching on her lashes. Her breath formed little clouds that quickly vanished. Not again, she whispered. 4 years, she'd run from the battlefield. Left the uniforms, the medals, the ghosts behind. She'd built a life out here, with silence as her only companion, and the wolves as her only neighbors. There were no orders, no politics, just the rhythm of survival. It had kept her sane. But sanity was a fragile thing. By the time she returned to her cabin, she moved with mechanical precision. The door creaked as she entered, but she didn't notice. Her focus was absolute. The inside was Spartan: stove, cot, weapon rack, shelves of MREs and survival gear. Her walls were lined with hunting maps, topographic renderings etched in fading ink. She sat at the small table in the center of the room and unrolled the map of the valley. She circled the ruins of the cabin with a black marker, then marked their patrol route based on where she'd seen them head. They weren't just exploring. They were herding. Ava stood and approached the gun rack. Her hands hovered over the newer weapons, an AR-10 with custom optics, a shotgun modified for breech loads, but she ignored them. Instead, she reached for the rifle that had saved her life more times than she could count. British steel, long barrel, matte finish. She ran her hand down the stock like it was a living thing. Then she opened the ammo case and pulled out rounds she'd spent nights crafting, hand-loaded .338 Lapua magnums with black-tipped penetrators. Enough punch to pierce those shiny alien suits. She took her time cleaning the barrel, checking the scope, zeroing it against her known landmarks. Each movement was deliberate, ritualistic. Her heart rate stayed steady. But deep beneath her calm, something had stirred. Not rage. Not vengeance. Purpose. Outside, the wind had picked up, flurries spinning in cruel little eddies. She dressed slowly, layered thermals, insulated boots, face wrap, and her ghillie cloak. She became the forest before she ever stepped into it. Her eyes passed over a photo on the wall. 3 faces. Hers, her CO, and her spotter, Lean. The picture was worn, the edges curled. Lean's grin had always been lopsided. They'd died 6 years ago in a desert where Ava had been the only one to crawl out. She didn't say goodbye. Just touched the photo once before heading out. Dusk bled into the horizon as she reached her overlook again. She set up her position beneath the low-hanging limbs of a pine tree, her breath slow, her body still. The snow welcomed her, covering her like a lover's embrace. Through her scope, she watched them again, 6 now reduced to 5. 1 soldier was missing. Possibly back at their makeshift base or on a different patrol. They moved sloppily now, confident, cocky. She could see their body language, casual and unguarded. They didn't believe they were in danger. Not here. Not from Earth. Not from a woman. Ava made a small adjustment to the windage dial and settled her cheek against the stock. Her finger rested gently along the side of the trigger guard. She wasn't going to take the shot tonight. Not yet. She needed to understand their patterns, their hierarchy. There was time. They had made a mistake, one so fatal it didn't need correcting. They underestimated her. The first time Ava had held a rifle, she was 10 years old, lying prone on her father's ranch, learning how to control her breath and align her sights. By 18, she had beaten every boy in her ROTC program. By 25, she'd led kill teams into hostile territory under Black Ops. She was never the loudest in the room, never the fastest, but when the time came for a shot that mattered, they gave her the call. Now, she was about to answer that call again. No generals. No mission briefings. Just a line drawn in the snow. Behind her, the dark woods stood quiet. But even the animals seemed to sense it. Something had changed. The hunter had returned. Ava packed up her rifle and slid back into the trees, disappearing without a sound. Tomorrow would be the first strike. She would leave a message they couldn't ignore, one carved not in language but in blood and fear. She would show them that Earth was not prey. Not while she breathed. Night blanketed the valley, hiding the sins committed in daylight. But in that darkness, something stirred. Not vengeance. Not hate. A reckoning. And it wore snow like armor. Snow fell in lazy spirals, softening the edges of the world until it looked almost peaceful. But nothing about the woods was peaceful that morning. Beneath the white canopy, shadows moved with lethal purpose. Ava McAllister lay prone in the underbrush, her rifle perfectly still, her heartbeat slow and measured. Through her scope, 5 armored figures trudged along a frozen creek bed, their boots crunching over ice that groaned faintly beneath their weight. She had studied them all night. Watched as they made camp, set minimal defenses, and took turns on watch, though their discipline was more bravado than strategy. They were soldiers by name, but tourists in execution. They believed themselves invincible. In this terrain, that belief would be their undoing. Ava tracked the one in the rear, a tall, broad-shouldered soldier whose helmet always tilted slightly left, revealing a vulnerability at the seam between armor and neck plate. He lingered behind the others, pausing now and then to adjust his rifle or scan the trees. Nervous. Unsettled. The fear had begun to take root. Good. She waited as the squad rounded a bend and the rear guard drifted further behind. The gap widened, and Ava shifted, adjusting the scope's focus. Her breath slowed, then stopped altogether. 1 heartbeat. On the third, she squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked like a dry branch snapping underfoot, echoing down the valley before vanishing into silence. The shot struck just beneath the helmet's tilt, shattering the joint and exiting clean through the opposite side. The soldier's body stiffened mid-step, then crumpled sideways into the snow. No screams. No final cry. Just a thud. Panic rippled through the squad. They scrambled for cover, shouting orders in clipped, synthetic tones. Ava listened as they dropped behind trees, their rifles sweeping arcs into the forest that held no answers. She was already gone, sliding back from her perch like smoke. Every move was memorized, rehearsed 1,000 times in dozens of terrains. By the time they dared investigate the kill zone, she'd vanished, leaving only footprints that led in 3 different directions, and none of them real. 2 kilometers east, she broke the treeline and slipped into a depression beneath an outcrop of boulders, already planning her next strike. Her breath came in soft, steady streams, visible for only a second before vanishing. She pulled a compact transmitter from her vest pocket and dialed into the Dominion's comm frequency. They had no idea anyone on Earth could do that. She clicked the mic once, then again, and in perfect alien dialect said, "One down. Who's next?" Then she cut the line. Let them stew in the silence. That evening, she stalked the perimeter of their new encampment. They'd relocated further uphill, setting up in a narrow ridge flanked by 2 steep slopes. It gave them line-of-sight advantage but limited their escape options, a classic mistake made by those who feared being watched more than being trapped. From Ava's angle, the camp glowed like a beacon, blue power cores humming with electromagnetic pulses, weapons charging stations pulsing with energy, and soldiers lit up in thermal like bonfires. She didn't need to breach the camp. She only needed to make them believe she could. Ava slid a sensor dart from her belt and flung it high into the tree above. It latched silently to the trunk and blinked once. With the flick of a control pad, she accessed the soldier's helmet telemetry. Heart rates, body temps, motion sensors, all streamed in front of her, a digital map of unease. The commander's vitals spiked each time a branch cracked, each time a gust of wind rattled their gear. The fear was growing. She wanted it to fester. Just before dawn, she circled back to the creek. There she'd laid her second trap, a line of small charge mines hidden beneath disturbed snow, just beyond a cluster of fallen logs. The mines weren't meant to kill. Not yet. They were meant to draw attention and create panic. She needed them exhausted, disoriented, and split up. Wolves never took down prey at full strength. As the sun crept above the horizon, the squad moved to investigate the area where their comrade had died. Ava watched them fan out, their caution painted over with frustration. They scanned treetops, took readings, cursed in 3 different dialects. One of them stepped near the logs. Click. The explosion wasn't massive, but it was sharp and loud enough to rattle the squad into a frenzy. A plume of snow rose into the air. The soldier who triggered it was knocked back, armor scorched but intact. Not dead, but shaken. Perfect. Before the rest could regroup, Ava fired again, this time a glancing shot that ricocheted off a tree trunk, deliberately wide. She wanted them confused, ducking, scattering. The soldiers dove for cover, returning fire into the trees, their plasma bolts sizzling as they hissed through the cold air. But they hit nothing but snow and bark. By the time they regrouped, Ava had already vanished again, a ghost on the wind. Hours passed. They didn't move. Not far, anyway. Too afraid. She intercepted a transmission, encrypted, but not sophisticated. They were calling for extraction. A pickup. She didn't allow herself a smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched. They were breaking. That night, the forest seemed to shrink around them. Ava returned to the ridge, staying just out of sight, listening. Their voices were strained, laced with arguments over tactics, responsibilities, and the identity of their unknown assailant. "She's just one," one voice snapped. "A human." "Then why are we 4?" another replied. Ava dropped another sensor, then moved further south to intercept a small patrol. Only 2 this time, sent out to scout the river. She knew their route before they did. The one in front, lighter build, probably a tech specialist, had a slight limp. The other was bulkier, more armored, slower. She waited for them to pass, then moved in from behind, silent as falling frost. The bigger one caught a flash of motion, turned. Too late. She dropped the first with a sweep of her rifle stock to the base of the skull, sending him face first into the snow. The second froze, hands half raised. Ava leveled her weapon but didn't fire. "Do it," the alien said, voice shaking. "I'm not here to waste bullets," she replied coldly. The soldier blinked. Why spare me?" She didn't answer. Instead, she cut a strip of thermal cord, tied his wrists, then blindfolded him. When he tried to speak again, she leaned in. "Tell them Earth isn't theirs. Tell them we hunt back." She jammed a tracking beacon into the collar of his armor and left him sitting upright in the snow, facing the trail that would lead him back. The other would wake eventually, bruised but alive. Let them tell the story. Let them fuel the legend. By the next day, the extraction signal had gone quiet. The commander, taller than the rest, his armor bearing a red insignia, paced the camp perimeter, snarling orders at what was now barely a squad. Ava watched him from across the ravine. He kept looking into the trees as if expecting eyes to meet his. His helmet stayed sealed now. No more arrogant jokes about weak humans. No more bravado. Ava shifted her pack, checking ammo. 3 magazines left. 6 handloads. Enough. That evening, a storm rolled in, thick clouds, gale-force winds, and sharp, stinging snow that cut visibility to almost nothing. It was the kind of weather that grounded drones and scrambled sensors. For Ava, it was opportunity. She moved through the storm like a shadow, wind and snow wrapping around her as she approached the far side of their camp. She placed a small speaker beneath a tree, aimed it inward, then retreated to a ridge above. She activated the speaker. At first, it was just static. Then came the sound of footfalls. Twigs snapping. A breath. Then a whisper in their own language, soft and low. "You're not alone." The camp exploded into chaos. They fired wildly into the dark, shouting over one another, plasma bolts searing branches and igniting patches of dry bark. Ava watched the confusion with the cold detachment of a hunter watching a trapped animal flail. She didn't fire. Not yet. She wanted them to sit in it. To feel the eyes in the dark. To know they had walked into a forest that would never let them leave the same way. By the time dawn broke again, only 3 soldiers remained in the camp. The commander. The scout. And one Ava hadn't seen act independently, likely Green, a rookie. Their voices were low. The commander paced less. Their fire stayed small. They were conserving energy. Preparing for something. Ava rested against the tree trunk, rifle across her knees. Her body ached with the strain of cold and movement, but her mind was still sharp, focused. Tomorrow, she would take the next one. Not because it was required, but because the hunt had begun. The wind screamed through the tundra like a living thing, angry and relentless. Snow slashed sideways in long, ragged sheets, devouring the landscape in a curtain of white. Visibility dropped to mere meters, and even thermal optics struggled to make sense of the chaos. For the Dominion soldiers who remained, the world had become a frozen labyrinth of paranoia. Every gust of wind sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow hinted at death. The 3 survivors hadn't slept. Their fire was reduced to embers buried under a shallow snow pit, and they took shifts staring into the dark, rifles trembling in their gloved hands. Even their armor, once gleaming with imperial authority, now bore scratches, burns, and the grime of survival. They hadn't just lost control of the mission, they'd lost control of themselves. Commander Jorrit paced inside the ragged shelter they'd constructed from fragments of wrecked drone parts and thermal blankets. His breath fogged inside his helmet, the seal cracked from a glancing blow days prior. He hadn't removed it since. The once pristine crest of red across his pauldrons was now dulled and torn. Each step he took ground deeper into the permafrost, each movement stiff with exhaustion. "She's still out there," muttered the younger soldier, Lexer, barely older than a recruit. His eyes darted constantly. "She's watching." "Of course she is," Jorrit snapped. "She doesn't need sleep, or food, or rest. Only the hunt." Torin, the squad's tech specialist and the only one who'd kept his nerves somewhat intact, huddled over a data slate. "I've tracked 37 false signals in the last 24 hours. She's got a field of sensor scramblers, movement illusions, heat signatures, auditory loops. Every time we think we hear her, it's bait." "Then she's not alone," Lexer said, voice rising. "She can't be. This is organized. Precise." "No," Jorrit said, steel in his voice. "That's the terror. It's just her. The silence that followed was heavier than any snowstorm. Outside, the wind shrieked again, a long, high-pitched moan that sounded almost human. Lexer flinched, clutching his rifle to his chest. "She's playing with us," he whispered. "No," Torrin said, eyes scanning data readouts. "She's starving us. Running down our ammo. Making us waste power cores. She's not reckless. She's surgical." And it was working. The battery cells on their armor suits were down to less than 30%. They'd burned through most of their food rations. The extraction window had closed 2 days ago. No one was coming for them. They were alone on a dead world they had mocked, and that mockery had come back with a scope and silence. In the white beyond the camp, Ava knelt in the shadows of an ice ridge, her rifle resting on a jagged outcrop. Her hands were steady, skin raw from the wind but still precise. The edges of her parka were frozen stiff, and her face, covered in a weathered mask, was hidden behind a visor etched with small chips and scratches. None of that mattered. She had lived in the cold before the war. It wasn't suffering to her. It was simply home. She was watching. Not shooting. Not moving. Just watching. Because fear didn't always come from the kill. Sometimes it was the anticipation. The long, quiet realization that something knew where you were, what you were thinking, and was simply waiting. Through her scope, she saw Jorrit exit the shelter, stomping to a higher point on the ridge, scanning the horizon. He looked slower than before, limping slightly, perhaps from frostbite, perhaps from fatigue. Either way, weakness. Ava traced his path but didn't fire. She needed Torrin to see her. She waited another half-hour before shifting position. Her movement was careful, practiced. She slithered through the snow like a second shadow, emerging near a patch of frost-laced birches. From here, she had a clean angle on Torrin's station. He sat alone, tapping at a console, mumbling. She took out a reflective shard from her pouch and angled it against the light to create a brief flash. Torrin froze. The light disappeared. He rose slowly, rifle drawn. He stepped outside the makeshift perimeter, gaze scanning frantically. Ava planted another flash. Just once. Further left. As he moved toward it, she activated the sound beacon, just a faint rustle, like snow brushing cloth. Torrin turned sharply, firing 2 quick bursts. He hit nothing. Jorrit came running, voice harsh through the comms. Where did you see her?" "Just movement," Torrin said, struggling to keep his breath steady. A flash. Then noise. Lexer emerged from the shelter, eyes wide. "This is how she gets us. Makes us see things. Then, boom. She's not a ghost." Jorrit barked, but even his voice had lost its conviction. Ava slid back again, deeper into the tree-lean. Her traps were already laid. No mines this time. Psychological snares. A reflective visor from the last kill hung from a branch. A glove, half buried in the snow. A symbol scratched into a patch of ice, a simple tally mark. One for each soldier. They would find it soon. And when they did, their paranoia would spike again. That night, the storm lessened, but the cold deepened. The kind of cold that crept into armor joints and froze movement. That stole breath before it even left the lungs. Torrin couldn't get the fire started. Jorrit snapped at him, then fell into a silent rage when the attempt failed. Lexer had stopped speaking altogether. He just stared into the dark, rocking slightly. "She's coming tonight," he murmured. "I can feel it." "No," Jorrit said. "She's waiting. Waiting for us to lose it. And you're proving her right." Suddenly, a shrill beep pierced the silence. Torrin spun to his console. Perimeter breach, Sector 3. Jorrit and Lexer raised weapons, bolting toward the signal. They didn't find anything. But when they returned, the shelter was gone. Blown apart. No casualties. But everything inside, rations, spare power cores, data logs, was reduced to smoldering shards. On the edge of the clearing, wedged into a splintered tree, was a single round from Ava's rifle. Embedded halfway. Deliberately placed. A calling card. "This is war," Torin said, voice shaking. "We're not a squad anymore. We're prey." "No," Jorrit snarled. "We are Dominion soldiers. We are not prey." Lexer laughed bitterly. "Tell that to the others." By morning, the Rook had vanished. No footprints. No sign of a struggle. Just his helmet, lying in the snow, visor cracked. Jorrit stood over it, breathing heavily. Ava watched him from a ridge across the valley, scope trained on the back of his neck. She could end it. One shot. But she didn't. This was no longer just a hunt. It was education. Reparation. Every hour they survived was a lesson in respect. By midday, only Jorrit and Torin remained, and the ice had begun to crack beneath their boots. Not metaphorical ice, real ice. They had wandered into a thin surface zone marked on Dominion maps as non-stable terrain. The irony was almost poetic. Ava watched from a cliff ledge as the two soldiers argued. Jorrit wanted to press forward, south, toward a Dominion beacon that might still be functioning. Torin insisted they should stay put, conserve energy, wait for an emergency recovery ship. "She's forcing us toward the weak ice," Torin warned. "She knows the terrain. She's done this before." Jorrit gripped his weapon tighter. "So we die standing still?" "No," Torin said. "We die if we keep thinking we're the ones in control." That was when the shot came. A single echoing boom. Not from Ava. From below. The ice. It fractured beneath Torin's feet. His legs dropped through the widening gap as freezing water surged up to his thighs. He screamed, flailing, trying to grab at the edges, but the slick surface offered no grip. Jorrit lunged and caught his arm. Ava didn't move. She knew how this ended. The ice cracked further. With a final, desperate pull, Jorrit hauled Torin free, collapsing in the snow beside him. Both gasped, steam rising from their armored bodies as water pooled beneath them. Ava closed her scope. Let them live. Let them feel it. As the sky darkened and the sun dipped beneath the storm line, Ava climbed higher into the hills. She knew the next move. She knew what Jorrit would do. Pride wouldn't let him retreat. He'd dig in. Try to draw her out. Make it a final stand. She would let him. She unpacked her final rounds, cleaned her rifle again despite it being spotless, and set the tripod with care. The night ahead would be long. And in the white silence of the tundra, terror would do the rest. Let the Dominion remember this cold. Let them remember her. Dawn broke without ceremony, a pale, dim light crawling over the horizon like a wounded animal. The sun offered no warmth, only a muted glow that revealed the scarred landscape, charred branches, shattered frost formations, and the ruins of a Dominion dream buried in snow. The tundra had claimed them. What remained were ghosts moving through a world that no longer obeyed their rules. Jorrit stood alone. Torin hadn't made it through the night. Exposure had finally taken him, rigid fingers still clutching the cracked data slate as if recording his last thoughts. Jorrit hadn't buried him. There was no point. The snow would take care of that. Nature didn't mourn. He stumbled across the ridge, armor groaning with every step. His oxygen filters wheezed in and out, clogged with frost. His energy levels were below 10%. One more night, maybe two, and he'd be done. But it wasn't death that haunted him. It was her. She had become legend in his mind. Not a soldier, not even human. Something elemental. Like wind, or gravity, or vengeance. She hadn't spoken a word. Hadn't shown her face. Yet she had dismantled an entire unit of Dominion elite using nothing but the land, her instincts, and a precision Jorrit couldn't fathom. He crested the rise and looked out over a frozen canyon carved by glacial collapse, the terrain jagged and treacherous. Somewhere beyond that valley, a faint signal blinked, a rescue point triggered by Dominion High Command after their distress beacons stopped broadcasting. He could see the flicker against the gray horizon like a mirage. That was where he had to go. And that's where she would wait. He didn't hesitate. He started walking. Miles away, Ava crouched beside a cairn she had built from flat stones, each piece placed with care. She had no name for it, no ritual. Just a marker for the fallen, for the land, for her memories. Her rifle was slung across her back, frost clinging to its barrel like lace. Her breath misted into the air, calm and steady. She watched Jorrit's form moving through the snow in the distance. A smaller silhouette now. Slower. But not broken. She respected that. But respect wouldn't save him. She began moving parallel, taking the high ground, mapping the valley in her mind. Every ridge. Every sound pocket. Every potential line of sight. This was her world. He was just a visitor overstaying his welcome. Jorrit stumbled once, then again. His boots cracked through a thin ice sheet, and he fell to one knee. He groaned, pulled himself up, and kept going. Every part of him ached, but he wouldn't stop. Not after everything. Not after what she had done. Somewhere deep inside him, past the discipline, past the guilt, burned something that refused to die. He wasn't just trying to survive anymore. He wanted to face her. Make her see him. Understand him. When he reached the valley floor, silence enveloped him. The kind that felt thick in the ears. A silence you didn't trust. He slowed his steps, weapon drawn, scanning every ledge. Snow had begun to fall again. Soft, lazy flakes that made everything feel deceptively peaceful. She was watching. He could feel it. So he spoke. "I know you're out there," he called, voice hoarse, distorted through a failing comm system. "You've made your point. Dominion arrogance, imperial hubris, whatever grudge you carry. I get it." Loud and clear. No response. Just wind and falling snow. He stepped forward. "But I need you to know. I didn't come here to conquer this place. Not really. I came because I believed we had something to offer. Structure. Order. A future." Still nothing. His voice cracked. "We were wrong." Above him, on a ledge partially hidden by snow-crusted trees, Ava shifted slightly. Her finger rested just above the trigger. One breath. One shot. He was exposed, talking like a fool in an open kill box. She had dozens of clean angles. But something in his tone kept her still. "I watched my squad die," he continued. "Every one of them. Not quickly. Not painlessly. You took your time. And part of me hated you for it." He looked up, straight ahead, as if staring into her scope. "But part of me understands now. We mocked your world. Mocked you. Thought the cold made you primitive. Thought your silence meant weakness. Turns out it made you stronger than we'll ever be." His helmet slipped slightly to the side. He tore it off, letting the cold sting his face. "If I'm going to die here, I'd like to see the one who beat me." Silence. Then Ava stood. She didn't speak. Didn't raise her weapon. She just stepped into the open, her silhouette a dark cutout against the white world, her rifle still strapped to her back. Jorrit didn't flinch. His lips curled, not in defiance, but acknowledgement. "You're real," he said. "Not a ghost." Ava approached slowly. Her movements were silent, fluid. She stopped 10 meters away. They stared at each other. Then she reached up and removed her mask. The wind tugged strands of dark hair from beneath her hood, and her face, fierce, wind-burned, proud, met his gaze without hesitation. "You're Ava," Jorrit said quietly. She nodded once. "You've made sure we'll never return." She didn't nod this time. Didn't have to. "You going to kill me?" Still silence. Then Ava spoke. "You already died the moment you landed." He closed his eyes. "Then finish it." Ava studied him. The sniper in her wanted to end it. Clean. Efficient. No hesitation. But the woman who had hunted ghosts through forests, who'd buried her friends in frozen soil, who had watched her homeland be underestimated and disrespected by the stars themselves, that woman saw something else. She saw a man defeated not by her rifle, but by his own beliefs. She turned and began walking away. Jorrit opened his eyes in confusion. You're letting me go? No, she said without turning back. I'm letting you carry the weight. He didn't move. Couldn't. You'll tell them what happened here, she said. Tell them about this place. About me. About the land that doesn't forgive trespassers. He wanted to protest, to demand understanding. But the words died in his throat. Ava vanished into the trees. By the time Jorrit reached the beacon, night had fallen again. A Dominion scout vessel hovered low over the horizon, its lights dim, protocols changed to avoid further provocation. They didn't speak to him until he was aboard. Didn't question the look in his eyes. Didn't comment on the frostbite along his jawline. He told them only what mattered. That they were not welcome here. That they had awakened something ancient and patient and fierce. That one woman had done what an army could not. And far below, in the whispering stillness of the tundra, Ava sat by the cairn once more. She adjusted the stones. Checked her rifle. Listened to the wind. One world. One war. One woman. She was still watching.